Ladies and gentlemen, hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Sherm in the Booth. My name is Sherm. You guys are some true Chicagoans for coming out in January. It's snowing outside, it's freezing, and you're at the fucking club at 1 a.m.
Boys with the bass, yeah, boys, bass.
Who am I talking to right now? You're famous.
Free food, free drinks, music, girls. Let's go.
Do you like it? Cool. You don't? Goodbye.
I'm missing the most important part.
Boys with the bass, yeah.
We should throw like a crazy bar mitzvah party.
This is crazy. Send me stems. I finished it.
What's up, guys? How's everyone doing?
Just wait, you know it kicks in like 3 to 5 seconds afterward.
Yo, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of Sherm in the Booth. I'm, of course, your host, Sherm, and today is Wednesday, February 8th, 2023, and this is episode 218. Hope everyone is having an amazing start to the year and is ready for an incredible interview today. I know most of you know how much I love connecting with both sides of the music industry, and today we have a back-end titan who's been making waves for a long time. We have the VP, Vice President of Disco Donnie Presents, Evan Bailey on, and I couldn't be more excited to share this episode with y'all. Evan and I met late last year at ADE in October, and after hearing him speak on branding and sponsorships, I knew I had to get him on Sherm in the Booth. In episode 218, we got it all in and started by talking about his journey into the music industry. Born in New York City but raised in Ohio, Evan always had a profound love for music. He was in a band in college and always planned on rock and punk until he went to his first rave and saw Chicago legend Paul Johnson killing it and fell in love with dance music. He shifted gears and went all in on electronic music, throwing parties, DJing, and immersing himself in this new world. He eventually crossed paths with the one and only Disco Donnie and joined forces. The rest is history. Now, of course, we talked about Evan's role with Disco Donnie Presents. He came in the early stages and has been a core influencer in helping the event and promotion company explode over the past 20 plus years. As vice president, Evan is responsible for a little bit of everything, and there's nothing that is below him when it comes to making the experience a memory that their fans will never forget. Spanning over 100 cities around the world, Evan helps Disco Donnie Presents produce thousands of live music events and festivals like Ubbi Dubbi, Sunset Music Festival, Freaky Deaky, and Lights All Night each year. We also had a great conversation on how Disco Donnie makes sure to push equity, inclusion, and diversity programming. One of Evan's major focuses is making sure that their events are a safe and comfortable place for both patrons, artists, and vendors. Evan recently set up a music scholarship through Vanderbilt that honors their former colleague Leon Jackson, and it gives anyone the opportunity to pursue music as a career full-time. Evan also works very hard to give a spotlight to diverse and up-and-coming artists to play at their events. His passion certainly shows on and off the stage. I loved this portion of the interview. 2023 is just getting started, but Evan and the Disco Donnie team have a massive year planned that is sure to drop some jaws. I cannot wait to see what they have coming. Evan is one of the most humble, driven, and intelligent people I've met in the industry, and I'm so glad we made the time to get his full story. Thank you so much for coming on, my friend, and I look forward to connecting again soon. Now let's get into it right now so you can hear his story for yourselves. This is episode 218 with Evan Bailey. Ladies and gentlemen, hello, and welcome to Sherm in the Booth. It is my honor to welcome Evan Bailey, the VP of Disco Donnie, onto the show. Evan, coming to us from Ohio in one of the coolest backdrops and offices I've seen in a while. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It is such a pleasure. I told a lot of people that ADE was one of the most transformative experiences for me. How much I learned, the people that I met, and you were one of those incredible people that I did meet. So it's awesome to connect with you outside of ADE. And yeah, man, it's just flown by since then, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a busy fall. We had, after I left ADE, we had 4 festivals until the end of the year. So yeah.
That was mid-October for the people that don't know when ADE was.
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, yeah, strong into the year. But, I usually have DJs, producers, artists on, but my personal favorite types of interviews are people like yourself who are more behind the scenes. I believe you guys are the lifeblood of the industry. You're the ones who help put the events on, support the artists, give us those stages. And I think it's really interesting to get the perspective of someone like you who works at such an incredibly successful and massive and amazing company like Disco Donnie. So I know the viewers are going to really like this one too.
Great. Well, I'm excited to tell you what goes on behind the curtain, I guess.
Whatever you're allowed to reveal. I'm sure we're going to find out a lot about the plans for this year. But I want to start off by asking you, Evan, I always like to kick it off with a question. We're, already halfway into January 23, which is so crazy. But I wanted to ask, what was some of your highlights from last year? It could be music or non-music related, because it was a big year in dance music.
That's a great question. I mean, I kicked off the year. I had a second child, my son Henry. So,
all right,
came off to a strong start. It was interesting for me because we had kind of been through the pandemic, kind of got going again. We threw Ubbi Dubbi in 21. It was the first festival back in the world. Kind of an amazing and transformative, honestly, experience, not only for us but hopefully for the industry. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I had a kid and I was sort of on maternity leave. And, when I came back, it's amazing that, this industry, even in a handful of months, it changes so rapidly.
Yeah.
So kind of had to start hitting the ground running over last summer as we were kind of going to the fall with festivals and tours and the like. So I don't know. I think some of the highlights, there are ones that I think people notice, and then there's ones that, are close to me. One of the big things we did last year was acquired Lights All Night, which is one of the longest, I think the longest running festival in Texas, and it's on New Year's weekend. And so we got to kind of produce that for the first time, soup to nuts, through the whole campaign, and work on the art and, I guess consider how its branding might differ from other Texas festivals and those kind of things. So that was a pretty fun exercise, and it ultimately culminated with a sold out event and a large indoor event, which is not something we do kind of routinely anymore.
Yeah.
So that was a big highlight. One of the things I'm really proud of, we launched a scholarship in the name of one of our former colleagues, Leon Jackson, he was one of the original guys. When I first started working with Donnie, he was a promoter in the South, and eventually we all worked together. But he passed away, unfortunately, of colon cancer about 5 years ago. And we worked with Vanderbilt University, which is, Leon lived in Nashville and established a music scholarship in his name, an endowed scholarship, one that'll give in perpetuity for, I guess, students who come from kind of diverse backgrounds. And that can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean economics, it can mean racial, identity, things of that nature, gender. So personally, I was really, really proud of that.
Yeah,
great. And I guess, we went through our kind of second iteration of travel events in 22, which is, an area we got into in 21 with Millennium and Ember Shores and Incision and Paradise Blue. And we kind of produced, sophomore versions of Ember Shores, for instance. And it was just kind of interesting to see the different crowds of travel events, start planning. Paradise Blue is going into its second year this spring. We propped up a new one with Cascade and Deadmau5 called Sun Soaked and Friends. And I don't know, we spent a lot of time in Mexico. So that was, if you're from Ohio, that's a good thing usually.
Yeah, it could be worse.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of the old days. We hadn't been doing shows in Mexico in, I don't know, it had been 10 years or something. So it was good to get back there and see how that stuff worked. And I don't know, I just really enjoy seeing fans in travel events. I guess I didn't expect that. I think, so many of these fans that go to these travel events, the first time they get a passport. Yeah. And, I think the events have a kind of a talisman effect in the sense that a young person gets a passport, they use it, they get kind of this global small global education, and then, hopefully do that again. And maybe it's a trip with friends or whatever. So it's, I don't know. Personally, I found that, kind of rewarding to see people traveling internationally for the first time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sure, actually, I never even thought about that. Probably a lot of people get their passports for the first time when they go to these travel events, which is so
Yeah.
cool.
Or some wait to the last second, of course. But yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Can't do that with passports these days, though. Everything's backlogged.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about expediting passports. If you ever need,
Have you? I bet. Yeah.
I know what cities do them and all that stuff. So
Okay, tell me if I'm wrong. Buffalo does them, right? Buffalo, New York.
I know Detroit does them.
Okay.
I've seen people go there. We had one staff member, I think, went to Boston. I'm pretty sure Miami is one of them. So there's, I guess, and there's brokers, or not brokers, but like people who do this professionally. So if you're really in a pickle, you'd be surprised how fast you can get a passport if you're willing to pay for it. So
wow, good to know. America, baby, capitalism. We love that.
That's right. Money talks. Yeah.
Awesome. Wow, what an amazing year for you. And it's crazy now. Like it's already 2023, and when we start talking back like into 2020, which time didn't exist, and then into 2021 when Ubbi Dubbi was April 2021, right?
Yeah, the first one. Yeah, back. Yeah.
What was that like, being sort of the spearhead and for lack of a better term, maybe the guinea pig of festivals coming back? I mean, I know you guys took a lot of precautions. I saw an interview that you did, and you guys did a really, really good job of rolling it out. But was there hesitance? Was there excitement? A little bit of everything?
I get like nervous thinking about it. I'll have a drink. Well, suck.
Love it.
Honestly, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened was there's a lot of different dimensions to it. I mean, at the time, there wasn't a ton of knowledge about a lot of things. You know, we have vaccines now. There are vaccines coming out that spring, but not totally rolled out. Mm-hmm. We know a lot more about how the virus transmits in, outdoor spaces versus indoor, and et cetera. So a lot of that, you have to imagine a world where we didn't have firm knowledge. And we were, like a lot of promoters, we were pushing events forward. It was like, all right, that's not going to happen. Push it forward 6 months, and the tickets and fans wanted to go, but it was a weird thing where you had to tell them, okay, another 6 months. And we were in an unusual circumstance in the sense we had an event on the books in April in Dallas of 21.
Yeah. And
in March, I think it was March 17th, around St. Patrick's Day, Governor Abbott said, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off state. We're opening up 100%. I'm done with all this. And I remember sitting right in this office and looking at it and being partially happy and partially like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because I knew we were going to face this discussion whether or not to do the event. And of course, like any team, there's a dozen or so of us that are kind of the core team.
Yeah.
We're in New York and Ohio and Texas and Florida and California, and everybody had widely varying opinions.
Yeah.
Not to mention, we knew we potentially could screw this up for the whole industry. So that was a lot of pressure. And probably the biggest thing was, generally when we promote festivals, it's a year-long process. And people don't realize that. I mean, we start planning stuff pretty much right after the festival ends for the next year. So, we were looking at essentially a month and a week to produce a festival that we hadn't really done anything for. A lot of vendors weren't moving fast. Sponsors weren't doing anything. So I started taking a ton of calls, me and a couple other people on the team, with various vendors around the country. There were fly-by-night testing operations. There were medical people we knew that were trying to work this stuff out. And eventually I was looking at a lot of what sports were doing. I believe at the time it might have been, we might have just got through.
Smart.
Yeah, I forget. Maybe it was baseball. I started looking at some of those playbooks.
Yeah.
I noticed a couple of the baseball teams, I think it was, were talking to Clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's the airport technology company.
Yeah.
And they had worked out this health passport thing that essentially was going to verify people's identity and testing, or at least do a screener. There was various conditional logic you could load into this program. Mm-hmm. And we liked the way the brand name looked. It looked like trust. It looked like, there were adults in the room. People knew, had experience not only with sports, but, airports. And
yeah, definitely.
so we onboarded them. and developed a pretty, I think, comprehensive plan. You know, behind the scenes, we were also going to research what happened. And so we were basically planning a survey, you know, after the event, like, did you get COVID and those kind of things? And we compared those data to the modeling in the region. And we actually worked with somebody from the WNBA on this project. Wow. Produced a white paper on it, but we were trying to understand, do outdoor events pose more risk than, say, anything else you'd be doing, going to the grocery store, this or that. Yep. And what we found was that the rates were actually lower because people were outdoors. But at the time, that wasn't common knowledge. You know, you were better off in a field at Ubbi Dubbi than you were at a house party or a restaurant.
Wow.
So, but it was an amazing event. Very hard to put on. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears. We're actually probably going to release some footage at some point about it once I don't know, you know, when the time is right, but
it's still going on to some extent.
We're kind of sifting through it. Actually, we've been, you know, it's one of these, like, I don't know, it's like projects in your house. I got to remodel all that thing. I'll fix it tomorrow. We've been going through it, so you know, it's probably something we'll release at some point. But you know, I'll never forget. At the end of the night 2, I was sitting there. I typically, you know, go up to VIP at some point or other, just to try to enjoy the show or front of house right at the end. And I was sitting there, and like Donnie's there, and Michelle's there, and I think Steve Gordon was there, and Jake Bernstein, and a bunch of these agents. And like we all, you know, the team had this hug, and I could tell, like, I get emotional thinking about it, but you know, like Steve was emotional. I think, pretty sure Cascade or Millennium was playing at the time, but it was, you know, it's just one of those things you'll never forget for the rest of your life. And but yeah, I you know, we got a lot of messages, you know, thank you for doing this. And I think it gave a lot of agents courage and a lot of artists courage, because, you know, there was discussion even with the artists internally. I know Cascade and Millennium were talking like, are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? Oh,
yeah, for sure.
All right, I guess let's do this, you know.
They're people too. That's justified.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was EDM Twitter is interesting place sometimes, especially in a pandemic. And you're talking about the first festival back,
yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot of stuff, but it worked out. But it's one of those things I'll never ever forget.
Yeah, well, mad respect and props to you guys, because I remember when that was announced, and I think as a fan of dance music, like you said, I was excited, but at the same time, as a fan, I didn't want to lose any progress we were making. So I obviously wasn't in the room where it happened, but I definitely can relate to sort of that middle ground where you want to take that chance, but you want to do it respectfully and safely. And yeah, you became a passport expert and a COVID expert over the past 2 years, haven't you?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, at least like testing and those sorts of things. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's what I love about this industry. It's what I've always loved about advertising, is you become a little mini expert in things. And I don't know, it's a journey or a lot of research, you know, and the insight that comes from it, to me, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I always think about how you can be an expert in your experiences, and that can be in whatever walk of life or whatever, you know, experience that you have. And yeah, it sounds like you've definitely gained your own expertise in a lot of different random fields.
Yeah, I'm sure there's other random things, but that's a more recent one. Yeah,
that happens. Well, we're going to get more into Disco Donnie later, but one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you today, Evan, is just to find more about your story. Just from talking to you at ADE and learning more about you through your research. I know you're a Midwest guy. I'm from Indiana. I'm here in Chicago. You're in Ohio.
That's right.
I'd love to hear more about like where you grew up and when music came into your life.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess the short answer is, you know, I was born in New York. I moved to Ohio pretty young. My parents came to a town called Kent, Ohio, to do their PhDs, essentially.
Cool.
Both my parents are anthropologists, so they moved around a lot. Like we grew up in fields, essentially, in weird places and that kind of stuff. And I guess we sort of settled down in this area. I always loved music. I mean, I think pretty much as long as I can remember, you know, and I started picking up a guitar around 10 or 11. And at the time, the grunge was exploding, so that was the stuff that really interested me. And I think within time I became more interested in improvisation. So I was interested in Fish and the Dead and those communities and jazz. And eventually that led me to jazz. Mm-hmm. So I was super interested in jazz. I actually, when I enrolled in college, I was a jazz guitar major. Like that's what I wanted to do with my life. At 18, I lived in a house with members of my band. Essentially, I lied to the university about where I lived. I lived at home because I wanted to live in a house where I could have a band.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I never lived in the dorms or residence halls or whatever.
Yeah.
So I started at the time I had a job actually at an amusement park. Mm-hmm. And it was a funny amusement park. This is not like a squeaky clean amusement park.
Kings Island, right?
No, it's called Jaga Lake.
Jungle Lake, okay.
The lake still exists. The park does not.
Oh, too bad.
But I was a gamer. So I was a real shy guy in high school, and I don't know how I got this job, but through friends and stuff. So it really brought me out of my shell, and it kind of, come on, you want to play my game? And a little bit of hustling. I mean, you'd get people that were a little bit unsavory, and you'd have to kind of work with them and stuff. Yeah. And I sort of became like this, I don't know, carny or hustler or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. I can speak carny, by the way, from that time. Probably not something to brag about. But anyway,
audience.
So all of the people I worked with, I became a manager, and the way we were paid there is we were paid at the end of the summer. So you had 16, 17, 18-year-olds at the end of the summer in the 90s getting 5, 10, 15, 20 grand of money at once. So we had these globs of money, which was more money than any of us had ever had in one sitting or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what do we do with this money?
Right.
And one of the guys, he went to raves and stuff. He's like, we need to throw a party. So I started helping these guys throw parties or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first party I worked with them, I sold water. And we had like Terrence, we had Terrence Parker, he's still around, Scott Henry, mm-hmm. Harry Mullen, who's, was one of my real early influences. And around this time I was, I mentioned I was like deeply into jazz guitar.
Yeah.
I started getting interested in the turntables, and I remember one day I had saved up enough money for a Paul Reed Smith guitar.
Nice.
I went to the store to buy this Paul Reed Smith, and something in me kind of snapped, and I ended up buying turntables. I bring them home. All my housemates, are in the band and stuff, are like, "What the hell? What is this?" So I don't want to say I had a falling out with them, but it was like I kind of put a stake in a different area of the ground, and started experimenting with records. At the time, it was a lot of break beats, and Chicago influenced me a lot in Cleveland, and so did New York. It's kind of like a pizza or something. You're not quite thin crust or Chicago.
Well
over that. Yeah, and the Midwest had an awesome rave scene.
Yeah.
And I went to this one rave. I just told the story the other day. I did an interview for Audience Republic, and they're like, what's the show that kind of did it? And I went to this New Year's party in 98, 99 in Springfield, Ohio, which is a place that if you've been there, it's not a place you visit. Like you go there for a rave or something. I'm sure it's very nice, but at least me at the time. So I go to this warehouse rave at this like antique mall or something. It's New Year's, and I go in and I walk in. This is the weekend that Music Sounds Better With You came out. I don't know if you know that record, but
of course,
everybody was playing it. Great record. And it was kind of like, whoa, it was like taking records up a notch. There were certain records like the Horny Song and that, and a couple things that were like, where did this record come from? It doesn't sound like the other records.
Yeah, jazz influences those for sure too.
Yeah. And I remember I walked in, and by the time I kind of got situated and was watching the music, I went up to the stage, and Paul Johnson was playing.
Nice.
And I didn't know anything about Paul Johnson or whatever. And here was a guy in a wheelchair on this like special riser that was real low. Yeah. And I think he had 4 decks, and he was just destroying this place. And it blew my mind. It was like, everything I thought about a lot of things was my preconceived notions was just sort of blown away in an instant. And then from that point on, I was just like all in on the thing. And I started DJing, and then I wanted to get gigs, right? So
Of course.
I went to this is an interesting little tidbit. I went to this club night in Kent, Ohio, where I lived, and I said, "Hey, I want to play," and I made a mixtape and all this stuff. And the girl ran it, who I'm still friends with. She was very nice and everything. She was like, "Yeah, whatever." So I was like, "Fuck this! I'm going to start my own night," and I did. Same club, different night, and me and a friend kind of built this thing up and outgrew the club, and we were actually promoting drum and bass at the time.
Nice.
And I was playing house, so that I'm sure the audience loved that.
Yes.
And we started booking talent, and I was talking to Kevin Gimbel about this the other day. I said, "Do you remember when I used to book, Diesel Boy and Sign and all those guys through when he was in Philly?" And he's like, "Oh my God, that was freaking 25 years ago or something." He's like, "Don't tell anybody that." So sorry, Kevin. So yeah, that's how it started. And then I started going up to Cleveland and doing shows and getting booked up there, and it kind of felt like the big city, which is silly now, but it to me it was.
Yeah, of course.
And not too long after that, I kind of got like it was interesting. He was almost like a business partner, manager, and promoter kind of friend, and we started doing big shows. And he had another guy he worked with, and long story short, by then it's 2003 or 4, and Donnie moves to Ohio. And at first it was kind of like, oh no, I've heard about this guy. He's like the legend of the South, He was like, there was Scott Henry on the East Coast and Donnie in the South and Pasquale in the West. And it was very territorial and tribal back then. So it was like, this guy's moving into Columbus. Like, that's too close for comfort. And I tell Donnie his story and other people. I'll never forget the first time I got an email from him, and it was very characteristic Donnie, like no capitalization, very positive. And it was like, we should work together, not apart. And I never forget that email.
It's amazing.
I remember exactly where I was sitting when he sent it, and I think we did like a Ferry Corsten, Paul Van Dyke show or something. And the rest is history. I mean, I could tell you that part of the history, but that was 20 years ago, and just how disco and crew, and there's a bunch of stories there. But
oh my God,
that was the start essentially to
that's amazing, Evan. Really, really great story. Thanks for sharing that. And I think it's definitely worth mentioning. I mean, you went to college still, right? And were studying advertising, and you got a master's in journalism. Is that correct? Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I did advertising.
Wow.
Mostly interested in design. The creative side of advertising, and then I taught advertising and got my master's in journalism. I worked in newspapers and ad agencies. So when I first started working with Donnie, he sort of tapped me for just that, was design. And admittedly, we started doing a lot of shows, so I was like a kind of a production guy in the sense that like I love doing it. So sure, Donnie needs flyer at 10 p.m. Let's do it. Let's get it up. And that was kind of how we first started working together.
That's amazing. So you really came in with like obviously this passion for music that clearly just called out to you when you walked into the store that day, and then when you saw Paul Johnson, it was meant to be. And then you still sort of had that mindset where I'm interested in advertising journalism. And did you know that this might work out together someday, or were you kind of just going with the flow?
I think I did. I don't know how I did. I didn't come from a lot of money. So I was always, I don't know. I kind of believe you're born a hustler, and it can be sharpened by experience, right? Or your family or your friends or whatever.
Agreed.
I needed to make money. So in college, I remember I took a bunch of student loans to open a recording studio, and I wanted to do just that, like a DJ recording studio, which didn't exist, and CD duplication and design. And I was just interested in all that stuff and learning as much about computers as I could. So I think early on that was there. And in fact, that was one of the reasons I gravitated toward advertising and journalism. Was it was like, wait, I can take a little bit from film and a little bit from pop culture and a little bit from design. And those are all things I love. And music, let's do it. So I guess I don't want to say I had a North Star, because, it's like that changes, but
I mean, you don't know. College is like, you're just kind of doing it. You're doing what you love, or trying to, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I did follow my passion. That's for sure.
Yeah. I resonate with that deeply. I went to IU and studied telecommunications, media production, and design. I do not do that for my day job, but I do that for this podcast. And I never really realized until I kind of got, into Chicago and was like, I've always wanted to do a podcast, and realized that I already had the tools. I knew how to market myself. I knew how to create it. I knew how to just go about it. And all these years later, I was just talking to my dad, and he said, when you went to Chicago and got a sales job, I was proud, and then didn't know much about music, but to see you now excelling and putting everything that you learned in college and applying it to your passion is like the most rewarding thing as a father. And I was like, oh my God, I'm emotional. I didn't even think about these sort of things, right? But sometimes when people give you perspective, it opens up your own perspective,
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that with little kids. I have 2 little kids, and I think about, I don't know, trying to cultivate those passions, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it'll be, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You always got to follow your heart too. That's the advice that I give out, and it's cliche to say, but it really is the truth.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. So let's get into Disco Donnie a little bit more for those that don't know, and I'm pretty sure everybody that watches this is gonna know, but Disco Donnie started in 1994, which is crazy. So you said he came to Ohio in 2003?
Yeah, right
so
around.
He had already been doing it about 10 years, putting on his own events.
Correct. Yeah, he had been doing them in the South. He had done these, I don't want to speak for him, but a string of parties called the Zulu parties. We're actually doing Zulu 29 next month.
What?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The caffeine parties, Hong Kong Phooey. He kind of like had this New Orleans kind of almost like a carnival kind of going on. Like he'd pick performers off the street and slam stuff together, and very imaginative stuff. And I think still pretty progressive even by today's standards. So yeah, he was already sort of a legend of the South when I met him. I think when I met Donnie, I think part of what he had already been doing shows in different cities.
Yeah.
But I think what I kind of worked with him on early on was sort of this expansion, this rapid expansion. So, we were doing stuff in Cleveland, where I live, Columbus, where he was, Indy. Still work with Slater Hogan to this day. Leon. Yeah, Leon
Slater. That's amazing.
Yeah. Leon in Nashville. There were some other characters, and we were, routing things through Florida and Texas and trying different cities. But essentially the idea, which wasn't super done a lot, was, putting DJs on tour buses and those kind of things. Yeah. Like we do Oakenfold that way, for instance. There'd been some tours like Moonshine Over America and stuff like that, but we kind of really hammered that in until we eventually, I think, what year was that? I think it was 2006 or 7. We merged with Insomniac.
Yeah, right.
And then it kind of took stuff to a whole nother level. So yeah, it was a wild ride those years. There was a lot of economic uncertainty and just the whole thing with Insomniac. It was a decade, this is like, 5, 6, 7 years before it's going to become kind of commercially accepted or viable, right, or something. So those were interesting years, like 2000 to 2010, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were visionaries. I mean, was it always dance music? Like, were you doing some bands or even hip hop and rap? Like, were you experimenting with fusions, or how did it work during that time?
There was some experiment. Donnie always seems to kind of come back to what he loves, which is dance music.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember doing a flyer for him. I don't even know if he'd remember this, for Lady Gaga. There were the Flo Ridas and stuff. There were
exactly,
things like that. But I would say generally, like 99.9% of what we book is dance. And that may sort of change. We may experiment with stuff here and there, and but it's what we, it's in our DNA or whatever.
Yeah, that time period is really interesting for me, and how you have this perspective of vinyl DJ, and then when you actually were creating flyers, printing those out. I mean, I assume you were basically handing out flyers to people, right? Like grassroots.
Yeah.
guerrilla marketing. There was no social media when you guys first started, like it is now, at least.
Not like it is now. I mean, there were internet forums. I mean, to this day, Donnie still believes, and I still believe in flyering.
Me too.
Partially because it's not the most the environmentally friendly thing in the world, but we often do it at festivals because the ROI is good on it. Put a box of flyers, get the message out really quickly. Sometimes people like those at festivals.
Yeah.
It's something where we have a hard time letting go of, but we certainly don't print like we used to. And because of social media. But yeah, it was a different time. A lot of flyering, a lot of like chat boards and forums. I remember actually, funny enough, SMS was a thing. Your phone used to let you like carbon copy people, like, and they wouldn't know it. Like, I remember I would sit there at club nights, like, "Hey, will I see you tonight?" And you were able to copy it to like your whole phone, and that kind of stuff. So there were some tricks and info lines, and I don't know. There was, I don't know, stunts. Like, I remember people would book, I don't know, weird old hip hop groups and porn stars and stuff to host their parties and stuff. So there were like tricks, both promotionally, but also in terms of the core product that, are very different from now, but were still fun and interesting, I guess.
Absolutely. And I mean, you said Donnie always comes back to dance music. I think everything is kind of cyclical. I mean, I've been in the industry for about 10 years now, which, is nothing compared to you guys, but I have seen some things come full circle. Like I said, I went to college at IU in 2011, and when I went there freshman year, Levels had just come out. I saw Avicii play one of his first shows that was literally in his book, Tim, stopping in Bloomington, going to Vegas, right? It was just this boom that just happened. Well, it felt like to me so quickly. Since you guys were in it, did it seem like a gradual progression, or did it happen faster than you expected as well?
There were some like what I would call like seismic, not warnings. They were welcome warnings. I remember actually one time sitting in my office, and Leon from our team called me, and he was like, "Did you hear what happened in Vegas last night?" Referring to EDC. He's like, like, I forget what number he said, like 60,000 people showed up, and this was like 2004 or 5. Like it was something was going on. But yeah, those what was interesting for us during that time is, we were the first acquisition of SFX. Insomniac almost came with us. They ended up going to Live Nation, and we knew Sensation and Tomorrow World and all this stuff were coming, and the Live Nation was involved, and it was crazy. It was like a gold rush, and I saw a lot of people I knew become kind of millionaires overnight, and acquisitions. And I guess the weirdest thing was like being involved with this sort of $1 billion roll up of Beatport, Tomorrow World, us, Life in Color. At the time it was Dayglow.
Yeah, I remember.
DEF CON, all these crazy events. And it was really interesting, at least for me. Like, I mean, first of all, I loved the music of that time. Like, it was so much fun. I think about it all the time. It's kind of that progressive house big era. Like, it was I
love it.
Yeah, it was good. It was good fun.
Yeah.
But also, like, for me, like with SFX, like I was learning a lot really fast. Like, for instance, I was seeing the blueprints of Tomorrow World. It's something they had been working on for, way longer than we had been working on festivals. And I was learning how Beatport worked, the software. And I was learning how the big boys and girls do brand partnership. And in fact, one of my mentors, Teresa Velasquez, she was actually killed in that condo thing in Miami a couple of years ago, but she taught me so much about, just how to wrangle brands and how to structure deals and all sorts of stuff. So it was so many of those years, like I felt like I was learning a ton, and we went from kind of like promoters that maybe had a lawyer here or there or an accountant here or there to like kind of this really squeaky clean operation. Everybody's got insurance, we grew up. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a special time that was just in dance music. I feel like, you brought up the progressive era, right? Like, I think it was, however, like sometime in the past 3 months, 10-year anniversary of Zed's Clarity. I mean, that feels like just yesterday that came out, Evan. And there's something about that music. Like if you were, us, right? Like getting into it, then it just spoke to me and I couldn't even explain it. And I just became enamored and obsessed. And that's why I eventually started DJing. Kind of like you. I just was like so interested in wanting to pick it up and just never stopped. And I still love it just as much as the first time I heard it live.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the, I don't know, I'm always interested in like what gets people into it. Because sometimes, I see it in the industry, like people won't be as supportive of certain artists or something because it's like, oh, they're sold out or they're too big. But, what did you look like the first time you went to a party? What did you listen to? What did you dress like? So, some of these artists have the ability to kind of bring people into the fold. I can't tell you how many people I know that used to love Steve Aoki and now love, I don't know, techno artist XYZ,
Absolutely.
You, like myself, used to love Bad Boy Bill, and I still love Bad Boy Bill, but like, eventually I learned of other stuff, and some artists are really great at that. I think, Peachy was so insanely talented, and a lot of those acts from that time that they just brought so many people into this that I think, it was incredible, frankly, what a lot of those guys did, Tiesto, Armin, etc.
Yeah, and in America too, right? Like I since I'm so passionate about it, I've done research, watched documentaries, going to Amsterdam, learning about it, right? Like it came from the US, Chicago and Detroit, then it went to England and the UK, and then it went over to Europe, and then sort of had that interim where it was still here, but it wasn't so like mainstream, so to speak, commercial. And then now you see dance music is a part of every pop song, always has been in some way. The songs on the radio, you see a lot of other artists that have been able to bridge that gap, especially in the house world these days. So it's an exciting time, I think, and it's only getting better and more creative and collaboration. And it's just a fun time to be in the industry right now.
Yeah, music never really snaps back once it's innovated. It's like you can kind of look at jazz for that playbook. It's like Miles does this and nothing's ever the same after it. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, at one point you listen to hip hop, instrumental, it sounds kind of silly, but now you're listening to it, it's like, wow, there's like some pretty serious production going on. So it's I guess a lot of those innovations have transferred into sort of contemporary music, I guess, too.
Yeah, definitely. So Evan, I want to ask you, I've seen you quoted as saying it's all about the experience at a Disco Donnie event. What exactly do you mean by that? How do you guys sort of think about people that are going to come? You curate the branding, the food, the drink, the artists, everything. What goes into that process?
Boy, I don't even know where to start. I'll start with the festival branding. I mean, often we'll have sort of a collaborative talk. It'll be people from our team, people from our video team, I guess our design teams, and we'll kind of talk about what we want to do sort of loosely with like a festival for a year. And what we're trying to do with that is not only like sync all the teams, but we're also look at maybe what the narrative of that event will be for the year, the things we'll sort of talk about, et cetera. So, that's often a pretty big, I don't know, channel or something that feeds a lot of what we do. It might even make its way down to like a beverage menu or something, not only the way it looks, but like things we name things, or it can have, so it has an effect not only like in the online campaigns but also at the festival. I think one of the things I've always loved about disco events, and I've heard people say this too, especially our festivals, is there's somehow we're able to kind of retain that sort of underground feel to them. In the sense that they're not overly kind of squeaky clean. Like Donnie takes sound and lighting extremely seriously. So that's often like kind of a cornerstone of like how we, from a production standpoint, look at things. There's experimental stage design and those sort of things, but those are two check boxes that we take very seriously. I don't know. I mean, we do a lot of like weekly calls where we brainstorm events and try to have fun with them. Sometimes it's with artists, like in case of the travel events. Often looking at things like art, for instance. I'd be not telling the truth if I didn't tell you like ticket sales matter. So the more tickets we sell, the more cool stuff we do. It's like we add production, we add art. Festival budgets kind of breathe a little bit depending on what's going on in the market. For example, like Ubbi Dubbi 21, we would want all out basically, like that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, those are some of the things that I guess determine like what events sort of look and feel like. But there's many other ones, but I guess from like a marketing standpoint, you often look at sort of the consumer journey. What does, from the time you see it online to you're getting your wristbands, to you're checking in, to maybe the lost and found table, to the, whatever, like you really got to look at a lot of these different facets. So I spend my time actually doing a lot of things that I don't know, you might not expect I do. Like I remember at Lights All Night, I wrote a few pages of copy just for the person at the guest services table. So it was sort of a consistent, correct message. It's not, so I don't know what people think people in this industry do, but sometimes it's stuff like that, and it really matters, because somebody's has questions, or I don't want to say in distress, but like they're looking for help essentially. So, and I think that was one of the things I sort of picked up working with Pasquale, and you kind of had that thing that a lot of people do, like obsessed about the details. And I think that matters. And if you're a person who works events, or works for an event company, like no job is sort of below you. It's like you need to understand what it's like to get a flat tire in the parking lot. You need to know what it's like to sell or buy the water. Just things that you might think are sort of, I don't know, common or something.
Yeah,
they all sort of add up to this cumulative experience. So I think that's kind of, I don't want to say it's a mantra, but it's like a way I think about it. Is that even these little touch points matter. It's like when you go to a restaurant, it's a 5-star restaurant, and the front door is filthy or something. It's like, what's going on here? But it matters essentially, or you're not greeted, or, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you said that perfectly. And the cool thing about you and the rest of the team is you guys are fans first, right? So you've had your fair share of good and bad experiences at festivals, at events. I have too, right? Like how long the line might be for water, the check-in to get will call, the bathroom situation, the lost and found, the food, like all those little things. And especially at sound and lighting, right? Like you want people to walk away saying, yeah, there were some things, right? Of course, but it didn't hinder my experience. Nothing's going to be perfect, but it looked great. It looked great. I got in and out. The parking was amazing, right? Like those little things that might not seem important are what people remember, because we're human.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I guess you could almost look at it mathematically. It's a value prop, right? It's like you have a pile of benefits, things that kind of take away from it, what you paid for it. And you kind of, people, it's like people by nature tend to kind of consider all those things. Like, some of the best meals we've had in restaurants, we don't think about what we paid for them, but you still might get mad at McDonald's if they screw up your order and it's $5. So, people kind of weigh these different factors. So in short, seemingly sort of innocuous things are important.
Definitely. And I mean, you just mentioned something about sort of ticket sales, how important they are, at least from my experience and what I've been hearing. Hard ticket sales are not as easy as they used to be. Not that they were ever easy, but, with the rises of inflation, how much it costs to get places, gas to the show, the flight, the hotel. How have you guys thought about that from sort of the consumer perspective, whether it be maybe trying to lower your prices or bring more value to that ticket?
Well, I actually believe fans will pay for something they feel has value to them. I think what we're seeing a little different now is that fans are being a little more choosy with how they open their pocketbook. And it's part of the reason we started doing stuff like travel events a little more. They're not cheap tickets. When fans spend a fair amount of money to stay 3 days in Cancun with artists X or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think what people are looking for is, the right talent, a special venue, a special event. I just, it's like the days of like propping up, tons of sort of club nights with headliners in a bunch of cities. I'm not sure it's like what the next 6 to 12 months look like. In sort of a challenging inflation kind of era.
Right.
I don't think it's good for the fans. I don't necessarily think it's great for the promoters either. So I think you're seeing this correction, if you will, where not only fans but promoters are being a little more choosy about the events they're doing. So that's one thing. I mean, look, like anything, you can look at your budgets and kind of look to, save money here and there. But ultimately, I think you kind of have to look inward before you kind of look. The last thing you want to do is increase prices.
Right.
Because it just makes it even more difficult. So we've tried to be very conscious of that. And things like payment plans. I don't know, low amounts of money down to get people sort of in the mindset of let's do this with their friends or whatever. So there are some, sort of marketing tactics that go into it. But I think that the underlying thing is that people and promoters right now sort of need these special events on both sides.
Completely agree, sir. And that's a really interesting perspective and response. I think it's a culmination of so many things, right? It's a lot of time has passed over the past 3 years, and people lost jobs, income changed jobs, moved, whatever it is, right? And the classic headline DJ X at this club that's going to be here probably again later this year or for this festival, you don't feel as inclined to go out and then let alone spend money at that venue that lost a lot of revenue, that's paying $16 for a gin and tonic or whatever it is, right? That's not what a dance music fan wants. So I think
also say an unpopular thing, and I'm sure people like our team would disagree with me on this, but this audience is getting older.
That's what I was gonna say, right? It's us. Like I get hungover as shit, Evan.
So, but it's like you think about your own life. It's like I still like to go out and I love events, but I am choosier now, and it's to use kind of a funny expression, it's got to be sexy. It's like I want to feel good about where I'm at. It's pretty simple. I want a nice drink. I want a nice background. I want some good music.
I want to be able to hear.
I want a little bit of space. So I don't think, my opinion's that dissimilar. I do think, I think there's an issue that probably a lot of promoters, regardless of genre, have to address, is that you have a cohort of people, let's say 18, 19, 20, who basically, the last 2 years of high school or first 2 years of college, we're not having the kind of social experiences that many of us had, prom, wild freshman year, the frat house, these sort of things. A lot of them were virtual. You have the explosion of TikTok. You have a lot of these, you have a recession. You have, the deck kind of got scrambled with COVID in the first place, where people are living and the like. So I think there's some work to be done, I guess, to get sort of your average 18 or 19-year-old out to, dance music events and probably rock events, etc. I mean, I ask friends about this all the time. And when's the last time you went to a concert? And because I'm just curious, about
why did you go? What was it? The artist? Was it the venue? Was it the timing? So many things.
I think a lot of us were more in a pattern of going to events prior to the pandemic, and while there was some exuberance to return, I don't think it was sustained. So that's just my opinion or whatever. But I think there's some work to be done with the younger demo as it relates to dance music.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Evan. And I mean, there's that fine line too. You mentioned that, sort of like that the dissocialization almost, right? Like behind the screens, through Zoom, whatever it is. Like maybe to be honest, sometimes, right? It's hard to meet people in a dance music environment. Like festivals are a little different, but these indoor club shows, larger indoor venues, you need to go with people and you can meet people certainly, but it's just different than it used to be. So I don't know. I definitely agree with you though.
Yeah, it's food for thought. I know it's like my background was in education. I still talk to a lot of people in education, and it's something they're seeing with younger students right now. Just kind of socialized differently, and I don't know. It was a tough couple of years for young adults, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note too, Evan, you mentioned Disco Donnie does a lot with equity and diversity and inclusion. And I think that's a huge factor in just the world we live in now. Like, people want to feel comfortable wherever they go. And I love that you guys have been pushing that. Can you tell me more about sort of how you've been spearheading this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's an interest of mine and Donnie's and a bunch of people on the staff. But I think, it's something we've always been interested in, things like outreach, like in education. We used to work with Moog on sort of an education program in schools. And but I think when George Floyd was murdered, it sort of, and, we had, the country was kind of shut down, right?
Yeah.
We kind of had, those were really dark days that summer, in my opinion. But I remember kind of just sitting there and sort of talking to Donnie about it. And I said, I think we need a diversity plan, where we started asking, I back up a little bit. We started asking the staff, like, what should we do about this issue? It's like, maybe our cake batter is a little vanilla here. And it's a paradox too, because, dance music was, started by essentially LGBT Black folks, so it was a safe haven for a lot of these communities to be together and feel safe and connect. And eventually it became sort of commercialized, and some would argue into kind of bro culture, and a very white kind of thing. So we started asking some internal questions, and one of the things I sort of came after talking to staff, it seemed like so many people wanted to do sort of education or work with schools. And I thought to myself, I think that's a great pillar, but I think there's more here. Mm-hmm. So that summer I worked on a diversity plan, and there's essentially 4 pillars to it. And one of them is education. Cool. But there's other ones like accountability, like looking within things like vendor pools and our own staff, and considering these sort of things when we hire, and how can we get new people sort of to enter this world, not only as staff, but as fans, and persist and be happy in this world. So there were different pillars we kind of looked at. And off that, this is a process, by the way. This is not something it's like, oh, got that done. This is basically a set of objectives to kind of work off of in the long run. And one of the things, we came up with was this scholarship in Leon's name. That was something, we took a lot of work to set up, actually. And I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, but the Leon Jackson Memorial Scholarship at Vanderbilt's Blair School of Music was a piece of that. We also developed this thing called Shadow to Spotlight, where we are essentially trying to give people opportunities to get involved with this industry, who, show that they're serious about it, and it could be, I'm interested in film, or I'm interested in AR, or I'm interested in whatever. We're trying to offer a little bit of mentorship at festivals. And, for example, if you kind of reached out and resume looked good and you seem passionate enough, we would essentially take you through the different departments of the festival during a day and kind of expose you to different things. What do you like? So that's something we've been working on. So like I said, the work's not done, but those are some of the things programs we've sort of set up from them. And we've also been kind of looking pretty closely at things like lineups, for example, like the Sunset lineup this year. I didn't necessarily count it, because to me, it's not necessarily about a quota. It's like looking at the lineup and going, okay, we have some female representation here, like substantial.
Lineup, Evan. Yeah, seriously. I did notice. I didn't count, but I did notice.
So things like that. Yeah. So we've been interested, in sort of gender equality as well. Mm-hmm. And we're doing, trying to highlight women in the industry. And I think that's one of the things this spring that I'll probably, now that we have the scholarship set up, try to work on a bit more. But, in short, I was talking to an agent at ADE, and they said, I'm just sick of looking at these lineups, and it's a bunch of, the same old names and a bunch of white men and these sort of things. Like, let's mix this up a little bit. And they're right, so those are some of the things that are kind of on our minds. But, this goes down to even the vendors at a festival. Do you have minority businesses included? We've also taken a really close look at our ADA program, not only the comms we have on our website, but partnering with organizations that can provide good experiences for these people, whether it's on the beach or in a field or in a warehouse. So it's been it's a consideration we're trying to take even further, just to basically make festivals more inclusive or welcoming.
Love that.
So those are some of the things, but yeah, it's an area of interest for me. And I guess if I were recommending to people what to do, start with one of those plans. What are those kind of main values you want to work on, and not just throw darts at a dartboard, but like, how can this stuff work as sort of a architecture to, I guess, move the organization and society forward.
I love that, Evan. I can tell how passionate you are about it, and that's great. Keep doing that. That's huge. And this is the time of year where a lot of people announce festival lineups, and it's actually been refreshing for me as someone who feels like I have a pretty finger on the pulse of up and coming artists. I'm seeing a bunch of artists that I've never heard of before. A lot of female, people of color, whatever it is, right? And then I'm doing my research on them, and that's how people discover these artists. And you got to give people a chance. So I love that.
Yeah. I think a lot of promoters are kind of feeling that way. I was looking at Coachella the other day, and granted, I'm not
exactly
a rock guy or something, but I was looking at the lineup and I was like, I think it looks like a fair number of new names on here. So it was good to see. I think there's both financial sense for that, but also as lineups reflect young people, I guess ethnic and racial minorities, women, etc. Like it makes this stuff makes good business sense.
Yes,
it's like So it's, I guess that's another thing. I remember I took a diversity course in college, and it was the editor of Knight Ridder. This is pretty fortunate to learn under this guy, and he was their chief diversity officer too, and he always would hammer down. He's like, this stuff makes great business sense. I don't know why people are so slow to kind of come around or kind of feel like they're bolted into it. Like, this is like when people see people like themselves on these stages, they want to be involved. And if it's all one type of person, it's harder to get a crowd there. So
absolutely. I mean, you're doing it for that person and where we're at right now, but you're doing it for the future generations. And I think you make a great point. People are inspired when they see, hey, I didn't think someone like me could do that. Baby Weight's a really good example of that. Have you heard?
Baby Weight?
Yeah.
No, actually, I haven't. You hit me on this, so I'll check it out.
Yeah. Trans person, absolutely amazing, talented artist, I think, based in Los Angeles, and just has inspired a whole wave of trans people. And it's just so empowering, and I love it. And I just see that so much more consistently. And I think really a lot of people's eyes opened up, especially after George Floyd. That was just really a moment where I feel like a lot of Americans shared sort of that, I don't want to say reality check, but we've faced a lot of those things and acknowledged them. And I think now you're seeing that in dance music more than ever. In 2023, just the gates are going to continue to open up.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think so. It seems that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about the state of the industry, and we've mentioned it a few times today. I know you've heard of 1001 track list before, right?
1001 track list? Yeah,
of course, right? I know everybody who watches this has. So they just put out their annual report. To no one's surprise, really, at least mine, tech house was at the top of the genres played in 2022 at 21% market share. So, I mean, I guess does that surprise you at all?
No, because I still DJ from time to time, and you know, the one thing I noticed playing, my buddy will sometimes have me out to like some of these big Ohio State kind of bars and stuff, and the one thing I've noticed is, that your average bar goer is dancing to the John Summit stuff like crazy. So I hate to say it doesn't surprise me, but it's welcome, for somebody who spent like 20 years playing house and techno. And everybody hated it kind of thing. Or, I didn't say everybody hated it, but you couldn't necessarily get away with playing it in every bar. You had to be choosy about when you did that and play the right venues and right shows. So, but it's welcome. It's awesome. I saw today John Summit and Green Velvet, one of my heroes, posted something together.
Over Petco Park in San Diego. I love it. Yeah. John is
exactly.
a shining example of really just staying true. I mean, I've known him for a while, and it's just been incredible seeing him grow and just being himself throughout the whole process and making music he loves. And tech house it's the space I'm in, and it's exciting. It's really exciting. It's not surprising to me, but like you, I'm a house music lover, so it's about time people actually put up a request that says Chris Lorenzo and not Lady Gaga or Beyonce. So I'm pretty ecstatic if that happens.
It's cool, I guess. I don't know. Another record thing I was sort of surprised about this year, but then again, not surprised. It's like just when I'm like kind of like, Tiesto and David Guetta, they've kind of done their thing. Like Guetta just comes out with this record, and it's the biggest record in the club. And I know it's the Blue remix and everything, but Rifle was 65. But that record was huge, and it was just, I don't know. That was another one of those things this year. I was like, all right, okay, he can just lay low for a while and just pop out with the biggest record.
He's just a hit maker, and it's true. Like, I mean, Tiesto, David Guetta, Alesso, they've all kind of dipped their toe. I mean, David Guetta has the Jack Back project, which is tech house. They're releasing on Defected Records and Tool Room and things of that nature. And I've had a lot of conversations over the past year of, quote unquote elitists, right? The Tiesto can't be in this space. David Guetta can't be in this space. And I'm like, actually, I love that they are, because what they're doing is playing tracks from people that are in the tech house space, right? And they're getting their music out there to larger audiences, and it's a good thing. And that's why it's always kind of been like that. But you get into that feel with the techno and tech house elitists, and I'm like, this is inclusive, people. Like, this is a good thing if people love our music.
That's kind of what I was saying earlier. It's like, it's not, not everything has to be your cup of tea, but one more person into this. I also firmly believe there's two types of records, like good ones and bad ones. All this
yes.
So is not underground enough, or this genre is like, I mean, to me, genres in dance music used to mean a little more like pre-99, but like after like the DJ Dans of the world, like we're speeding up house to make a techno or vice versa. It's like, it just, to me, it seemed like kind of one big genre. And I understand there's obvious differences, but to me, it's two types of records, good ones and bad ones.
I love that. I'm stealing that line from you, Evan. That's perfect.
You gotta tell me that line was Frankie Bones.
Frankie Bones told you that? Okay, all right. That's good.
So I can't take credit for it, but it stuck with me.
I'll make sure to cite that in my thesis paper on house music.
Okay. All right.
So last question for you, sir. I just want to know what's the plans for you this year and the rest of the Disco Donnie team. I know you had a busy spring that's coming up right now. Anything for the summer, the usual festivals, or what can you share?
I can't share too much. We actually do have an announcement coming probably in the next week or two, which I think might surprise some people. Okay. It's something pretty new for us, and it's a festival. Cool. So stay tuned. I guess you'll see that. Right. We have Ubbi Dubbi in April. We have Paradise Blue in Cancun in April. We have Sunset in May. Often, the summer is like festival season. We tend to like lay a little lower in the summer because we tend to produce our festivals in Texas and Florida. And if you've ever been to Texas or Florida, like in June, it's not necessarily a place you want to have a festival.
Constantly sweating.
Sometimes, it's dicier. So we kind of focus often on tours over the summer, and then in the fall, prop up a few festivals, like we'll have Lights All Night and Freaky Deaky and, some travel events probably. So we tend to kind of follow these spring and fall patterns. I'm not sure why, but yeah, there's definitely something coming in the next couple of weeks that is new and fresh.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to hear about what it's going to be. It's going to be the biggest year for you guys ever. And congratulations to you. It's just amazing being able to connect with someone like you, Evan. So once again, I appreciate your time.
Me too.
And,
thanks for having me.
Us Midwest guys, we're trying to make it out here together, aren't we?
That's right. And I appreciate that's really true. It's a hard place to, I know you're in Chicago, and But the
Came
Midwest
from
is
Indianapolis, where it's me and Topher Jones, and that's it.
yeah, I know Topher very well. I guess it's interesting because in the Midwest, it's not like you're in LA or New York, or even Nashville. Like you really gotta hustle here to get involved, and it happens, and luckily a lot of the stuff happens online, but it's definitely a interesting kind of place to come up musically or something.
Yeah, well, there is so much history in the Midwest. I mean, Chicago obviously speaks for itself with blues and house music, but yeah, I'm a Midwest guy till I die. That's for sure.
Me too. I can't tell you how many Zoom calls I get on. People are like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Cleveland." They're like, "Oh." I'm like, "Why?"
They're like, I don't know what to follow up with there.
Yeah, but it's the third coast. Yeah, so Midwest, baby. That's right.
Midwest, baby. Well, Evan, thank you so much. I had so much fun, and you've got a really, really interesting and broad perspective that I think is definitely going to resonate with my audience. So thank you so much, sir.
I hope so. Thanks for having me on. Have a great night.
Man, do I love Sherman the Booth. Oh, hey, I think you do too. Hope you enjoyed that piece of content. If you're looking for more, make sure to go to my YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any upcoming Sherman the Booth interviews, live sets, new music, exclusive artist interviews, Sherm's Word, sub-pack reviews, and more. This is your one-stop shop for everything entertainment. Cheers.